And good evening. Welcome to another edition of Keene No Spin. I'm Randy Filiault.
And I'm Dave Richards.
And we do have a guest coming in this morning. Jack Dugan will be joining us shortly. He just called, running a little bit late, but he is, I'd say, speeding through the streets of Keene, but that would implicate him, so we'll just say he's on his way.
But by the time everybody watches, he'll have already made it.
Well, the great thing about taping here is that we can just go time out. And so Jack will be joining us shortly, but that'll give Dave and I a couple minutes to start the show off with. And first of all, congratulate Ruth Sterling and everybody involved with Pumpkin Fest.
Yeah, we beat them 29,000, 22,000.
Yeah, something like that. Get it right here. Yeah, it was about 22 they had. The interesting thing was both cities actually wound up having more physical pumpkins. It's just the rules of the Guinness, world records are they have to be cut to a figure that you can see, not just a hole blown through them. And they have to be illuminated.
Yep, and they really struggled. Did you get to watch the show?
I did. I watched the show, and the one thing that you really noticed is, well, they virtually had an assembly line.
Yep.
So, I mean, as nice as their festival, I'm sure it was, because you didn't get to see everything on it. It looked much more mechanical than Keene's.
It did. It looked like a nice town, though. I mean,
no doubt about it.
But I kind of think the mechanical thing hurt them because they went through and behind, the backside of every pumpkin. They drilled through.
They didn't cut the tops off. They just blew through the back.
And tore all the guts out. So then when it got windy, though, they had all the candles lit. And I think that 4-inch hole that they had in the back created wind.
The wind blew out the pumpkins.
And because they used the assembly line method rather than the homespun, hand-carved method we use.
That's right. Yeah.
I think that the aerodynamics did not work out well for them.
No, there was the love put our pumpkin carving kept them lit. Yeah. But kudos to Highwood, because one thing that it did do was it did create the energy. Because without them doing that, we wouldn't have had the energy.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the competition, it definitely made the competition real. They have actually requested to become a sister city with the city of Keene, which is also cool. That's moved on. That was moved on last night at council to the city, the mayor and the city clerk to start working out the details of how we do that. So. Yeah. Overall, it's all good.
It's going to be a love fest.
It will. And we'll beat them again next year, and it'll still be a love fest.
And the one thing that show, the TV show, you did see on that was the organization, even though it can get helter-skelter. And I was talking to Ruth Sterling the other day about it. And she even said, anything that can go wrong does go wrong because it's all volunteers.
Right.
Some volunteers don't show up. Some misunderstand where they're supposed to be. So, yeah, there was definitely some glitches.
Yep.
But I mean, an event of a magnitude that's going to bring in about 70, 75, 80,000 people, whatever the final tally was, it's hard to say.
It's up there.
When you consider how many people came in, and it was basically all based on volunteers helping out.
Yep.
It went well.
Well, it went well here, and it shows. I don't want to pick on Highwood a little, but it shows a little bit of their inexperience because
that's right. Organization.
Because when we counted the pumpkins, I mean, it was Nancy Sporberg. You knew everybody in the room. Yeah, we've done this. We'll go out there and get it done.
Yep.
They struggled a little bit because they in Highwood because they'd set up parameters and people weren't real sure where they were, and you only have a very limited window to count them.
Yeah.
So.
And as you mentioned, that big hole in the back of the pumpkin,
blowing all the candles out
by mass production that. Well, that'd be an example with us downtown. If all the pumpkins had holes that big and that wind comes out of the west,
it's over.
They're down.
I mean, it was lots to talk about. Very fun.
Yeah, fun time. And talking to Ruth again the other night. Day one, it begins again.
Yep. I think overall everything went really well this year.
Yep, I do too. And let it shine. I mean, now they've had it under the belt for 2 years. You learn the glitches and you improve upon it. So, for those that don't like the Pumpkin Fest, and there are people critical. I guess it's that one day. If you don't like it, you just plan on visiting relatives out of Keene.
Go visit relatives and
rent your house out. God knows there's no hotel rooms between here and Manchester.
You can rent your driveway. You can rent your house.
Yeah. Take advantage of it. So it's funny because hearing some of the volunteers this year. After we found out that we had won, which actually got people more motivated again.
Right.
Obviously Highwood is more motivated again because they want to go at us again next year. The goal for Keene next year is, hey, we can do 40,000 pumpkins.
Right.
And from what we learned this year, you realize you can.
Yeah.
You have to start the process a little earlier. Get those truckloads in a little earlier.
Yep.
You got to get volunteers. Obviously, the contributions from like CNS and Clark Distributors was huge.
Yep.
But anyhow, kudos to all involved.
Right.
You know, it's one of those events that we talk about for a long time. It's amazing because all in all, it only lasts one day.
Right.
But it takes a whole year to pull off.
Yep,
So.
and it went awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Congratulations to everybody involved in both communities. I mean, everybody really had a lot of fun making it happen this year.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, and hopefully HGTV picks it up again next year.
Well,
you know,
you almost think they would, right? You know, because they generated energy with it, and
I've had relatives from across the country. I have relatives out in Indiana, and they watch HGTV, and they were emailing me and on Facebook just saying. They were watching it. They were looking forward to coming on, and I think you saw that. So not only did we get that one day of Pumpkin Fest,
right,
but Keene got national exposure that you can't pay for.
Yeah.
As far as tourism, people see that, and not only do they come for Pumpkin Fest, or the ones that did come for Pumpkin Fest, but they come for other events.
Right.
And also, kudos to HGTV and Keene State College. I think if you watch the show, we always get the negative side of the students at Keene State.
Yeah, that's true.
The bad apples. They make the press. We talk about them here, and what you saw there was a bunch of students that were really into it.
Into it, having a lot of fun, and from all over the world.
Yeah, and that's it for Pumpkin Fest. And by the our studio managers out there and our audience have just indicated that our guest has arrived via motorcade, and the limousine has pulled up. Secret Service is clearing the area now. So we're going to pause for about 1 second, and we'll be right back. Time out. We're back, I think. Our illustrious production team came out in droves, got us all wired backed up. They got Jack's motorcade and the limo all taken care of. Secret Service has cleared the area, and we're good. Welcome, Jack.
Thanks, Randy. Appreciate it.
Jack's
for the viewers.
We thought we were first thing in the morning, but you've already had to go to an event.
There was a nice event this morning. It was called it's for Heading for Home, which is a local group trying to promote different types of housing opportunities in Keene and in the Monadnock region. And some of our development on the railroad land has resulted in some new housing opportunities between us, and it was kind of neat. We had an opportunity to kind of reflect and look back at the railroad land and see what we've accomplished so far and what's going to happen over the next couple of years. And we totaled it up, and between us and Southwestern Community Services, I think we're going to end up creating almost 100 new housing units on the railroad land in downtown Keene. And a nice mix, some of it is income regulated or income restricted, some of the Southwestern stuff, but we have high-end residential condominiums. We're going to have high-end residential rentals. We're going to have market rate rentals. We're going to have accessible units. So it's neat. You bring 98 units to downtown, and all those people with money to spend on Main Street. That's what it's all about.
Well, we were just talking just before we came back on air about talking about the courthouse, which I think we're going to get to, obviously. But since we've already started with the railroad land,
might as well.
We rolled right into it.
I'm going to help him. I'm going to ask him easy questions that makes him.
Dave's going to be lobbing the softballs here.
I will. Originally, when we began developing the railroad property, we were promised how much in taxable revenue, taxable value.
Well, we had to sign a development agreement with the city when we bought the property from the city, and what we told the city and what the city said they needed was that we had to guarantee the investment of at least $13.2 million, I think it is, on the railroad land. We're not done yet, and we can talk about some of the next things coming down the pike. But so far, what we've been able to accomplish is somewhere in the neighborhood of $35 million or so in investment on the railroad land. When we're done, I suspect we're going to be in that $55 to $60 million range.
Okay.
So for all the naysayers out there that didn't think this might have worked as well as they could have hoped from the beginning, well, that would be 5-6 times what we thought we were going to get in taxable income for the city.
When all is said and done.
Yeah, when it's all said and done, and how it's evolving is kind of neat in that it is the mix of those housing units, but there's a lot of places where people work now on the railroad land, places where people go to be entertained or enjoy leisure activities like eating out at Nicola's, so it's a nice mix. We're basically building a whole new neighborhood. It's really been great.
For those of us that been around Keene for a while, not to date myself, but I remember when the locomotives used to idle overnight down on there, and then as years went on, basically just became a waste barren out there, just a collection of just dirt.
Again, like, getting a chance to reflect before I had to speak to this group this morning, went back and looked at some of the old pictures, what the railroad land looked like, and it was blight.
Oh, yeah.
It was
the
abandoned
surface
cars. There was it was overgrown brush. It was in rough shape, and it was owned by the city. I mean, they had the foresight to buy it from the B&M when they pulled up the rails in the '80s, I guess.
Yes.
But it wasn't producing anything, and now, as we just talked about, there's a lot of taxable value there already, and a lot more coming down the pike.
Now, as we see the development, of that. What is it now? We see the food co-op. Obviously, that's under construction.
It is, yeah. It's nice to see the steel coming up out of the ground.
And they're estimated to open approximately when?
We're going to be done there in March,
Okay.
and that's an example. We do a lot of different things at MEDC. Sometimes we make simply loans to businesses to help them. Sometimes we sell things like land, for example, our development rights on the railroad land. Sometimes we develop our own properties like 51 Railroad Street. The food co-op is similar to 51 in that MEDC is building the building. We're buying all their equipment, and we're going to lease it to them basically as a turnkey facility.
Okay, excellent.
And so it'll be done in in March.
We're talking spring.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
That's excellent. And one of the things that especially people that live on a lot of the housing developments in the downtown area. And a lot of them are elderly, and they've always complained about, especially when the little small markets moved out of the area and all the supermarkets are on the other side of Keene.
Yes.
I mean, this gives them a place to walk to actually get their groceries.
That's right, and right on the east side in downtown. It's 13,000 square feet. Obviously, I can't show you the floor plan now, but it's
Right.
It's a full-service small grocery store owned by member owners throughout the region. They've done a great job, the food co-op people. I mean, they've got over 1,000 member families now that have paid money to become part of this thing. They've raised member loans to help, for working capital, so when they do take over, they're ready to go. And what's also nice about it is, for those of you who have had an opportunity to go through the railroad land, the bike path will wind its way right through the middle of the site, and so you have Nicola's dining outside on one side of the bike path. The food co-op is going to have outside dining on the other side. After we go through the courtyard, that will be available for weddings. I know the Marriott is going to start holding weddings out there next summer once we get it all landscaped and done. Outdoor performances are just a great place to come and visit and hang out. Once you go through that and out the other way past the Marriott's going to move a cafe outside, and we just signed a purchase agreement to sell the last developmental unit on that central circle there to a developer who wants to build a mix of commercial space again on the first floor. We suspect there'll be some outside activity there as well, and then at least 30 high-end rental apartment units on the upper floors.
How many floors does it look like that building will be?
5. Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a mix of 51's 4 stories. The Marriott's 5. This new building will be 5. The food co-op is it's an open building like supermarkets are, but
Right.
it's
Equal to maybe 2 or 3 stories
yeah,
in total
yeah.
height.
Yes, I'm sorry, I got a cold here.
That's
so
it. See, we even dragged you out of the sick bed this morning. Dave and I are ruthless about that.
So anyway, so that's coming down the pike. So the food co-op's going up. This other mixed-use building's going up, and then we're looking at right up on Cypress Street. We have a small, not a very deep lot right up on Cypress Street. We're looking at a couple of new buildings there. Again, a mix of commercial space and housing. So
Sounds great.
yeah, it'll be. When we're done, this is what I picture anyway. You come in off of Main Street and you walk down. It's nicely landscaped, and the trees have the little white twinkling lights on them, and people are eating in the outside dining areas, and it's just a very pleasant, active place to be.
So this last building you just talked about, what are the the time frame basically for that one, if all goes according to plan?
Well, the larger one, the mixed use with the high-end rental apartments, there's an interesting contingency in the purchase agreement, and that is that they have the ability to rent spaces in a parking garage from the city. The parking garage doesn't exist yet.
I'm thinking, which one are we talking about?
That's right. So I think downtown is great. I mean, we have very few empty storefronts, but in some respects, we're kind of victims of our own success. We have exhausted. We have on our dime built, are in the process of building almost 350 at-grade parking spaces on the railroad land. We have, when we're done building this next parking lot, this is before the new development, this mixed-use building, we have one unattributed space. So these people are saying, we want to invest. We want to invest, another $7, $8, $9 million in your downtown, but we're not going to build high-end residential units unless we can.
Unless you can park.
Unless you can park, and they were very willing to pay for it. I mean, they're not looking for it for free, but and I think that's the only thing I think that will hold up some of these larger developments as we move forward.
So our illustrious city council should, basically, I would assume that a proposal is going to be brought forward for parking.
Yeah, it actually has already, and I mean to the extent that the what's the CIP.
Yep.
This is not coming in out of left field.
Right.
I think everybody knew that as we developed the site, there was going to be some need for some additional public infrastructure to support it. Yep. So it was put in the pipeline several years ago, and now it's
before the whole courthouse and fire station.
Yeah.
Back in my days on the council, we talked about that, and that was exactly it. It was like, okay, time out. Let's back burner this while we figure out what's happening with the fire station, what's happening with the courthouse, what's happening with the latches, and what's happening on the railroad property.
But if it's
now as you look down the road, all those things have started to come
into place.
And it's the capital improvement projects budget. And if it's in there, that means we're budgeting for it and we're getting ready. We had discussed, not the specific project, but how we were going to handle other parking issues. And really, the city manager came up with a great idea. Rather than building one 4-story monstrosity somewhere, we put like 2-story decks
spread them around
in various places. And I'm, I can tell you, I'm sure I'd like to help as a counselor to, move this forward. So it's budgeted. Come on in and talk to us. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, and it's budgeted, and the fact that the railroad land is in the tax increment district in downtown. In an odd kind of way, this next investment on top of all the other investments that is spinning off, I think there's $1 million in tax revenue coming out of the East Side TIF now every year. Yeah. So you can take, because it's in a tax increment district, you can take some of that tax revenue and pay the debt service on these bonds.
Yeah, and you just mentioned that, and, to the viewers, it's $1 million a year coming out of a tax district that was created when we started doing all this development.
Right.
And that obviously, offsets or prevents anything from being brought in from the general fund. In other words, taxpayers do not have to contribute to this. This is money's coming out of this to pay for itself, and then any money left over, now that goes into the general fund. And that's called not spending money. That's when we talk about that's investing money.
And thankfully for the foresight, because the state, I got to hit them, right? They cut $1 million out of our budget last year, so we got to do what we can to make that up.
Oh yeah, and God forbid what happens next week, because if certain people get elected next week, we're going to be scrambling.
I'm not sure it's going to happen. I think the crazies are going to get beat next week.
God, we can only hope. But anyhow,
you don't have to say anything.
We're nonpartisan.
We're nonpartisan. Yeah, Jack's nonpartisan. We do this. We do this with everybody, with the city manager, the fire chief. Okay, you can be quiet for a minute. They're crazy. We need new people. Get out and vote on Tuesday, all right?
Yeah, absolutely. Dave and I are both going to be working at the polls, so we'll say hi.
We will.
Anyhow, back to Jack.
Yep.
So now the railroad property, that's going to be almost 100%, which is amazing when you consider back when you and I first talked about this years ago. When, a lot of people that have been in Keene a long time remember it was just dirt for years.
Well, I said
so many projects came and went, and I know we worked on together a long time on an ice arena, and it made it all the way to here. Then,
right?
And it's like,
ballpark, ice arena.
Ballpark. Yeah.
We did though. Was that my first year on council? We got the money for the infrastructure. And that was a really kind of tough fight.
Yep.
Because there were people who didn't want to do it. And we had to do it. It was December. We had to get it done because
the water and sewer had to get done anyhow.
They had to get done so we could do whatever we were going to do. We couldn't do anything without that in place. And it was so touchy to go back then that we had to vote for the bond for the water and sewer. It was December. The council was changing. And there were people who were going to come on who weren't going to support it in January. So we had to make the move, politically.
Because
so we got the 10 votes in December, so we got the infrastructure in.
And that's a good point, Dave. And I know, Jack's been working on the railroad property back when it was just dirt. And I always compliment city councils in Keene that have been progressive-minded because, and back when that vote came in, we were just looking at dirt.
Yeah.
And so the council had to make the vote to work on the infrastructure, water, sewer, electrical, upgrade everything, before anything was there.
Right.
You had to do forward thinking. And there was a lot of naysayers that just said, it's always just going to be dirt, you're wasting our money.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's what happens with forward thinking. Claremont, Laconia. I pick on them because they and I know you've tried to work with other communities, including Claremont.
Yeah.
And they can't quite get out of their own way, it seems, at times.
Yeah, without mentioning Claremont, because
we won't mention Claremont.
We still own some property in downtown Claremont, but
anybody get a couple of bucks?
Yeah. No, we did. We actually did a really neat little project right in the center of the town called the Brown Block, and we took again a blighted property, just like we did with the old Sears and the Woolworths and Goodnose in downtown, and we completely renovated it and repurposed it. So that they have had their success stories, but again, to kind of back up what you said about the Keene City Council, we have been we've been working for years and years and years on downtown projects, and invariably we have to go to the council for some type of guidance or help or or partnership. And invariably it's been there for us. I think the majority of the council looks at what we're trying to accomplish, and steps up and helps. And it's actually evidenced most recently by the courthouse project. You're trying to keep the courts in downtown. You have these restrictions on how much the state's willing to pay for rent that almost made it impossible. And we came up with this at MEDC, this interesting convoluted, interesting funding structure, which included federal tax credits and tax-exempt bonds and all kinds of different crazy things. And again, to the council's credit, we went to them and we're trying to, and you're trying to explain this convoluted structure.
It is.
Basically showing a piece of blank paper.
For
the most part, and trying to fill it in.
Yeah, and trying to say this is what we can do, and this is how we're going to do it, and it might be because we have a pretty good track record now over the last couple of decades, that I think some of the councilors who may have been on the fence said, they've done most of what they said they were going to do, and downtown has benefited by it, and if they think they can pull this off, let's give them the benefit of the doubt again, and we have. In fact, the groundbreaking is this afternoon at 3 o'clock on Winter Street. Yeah, so that's an exciting time. You won't see any significant activity out there for maybe a few weeks, and then you'll hear that downtown Keene sound of progress. Clang, clang, clang. The piles being driven into the ground. And
get ready for a couple of calls there, Counselor.
Yeah, that's right. And there will be, as in most of the buildings that we build in downtown, there'll probably be more steel underground holding the thing up than there is on the upper floors.
You don't go down too far in Keene and hit water.
That's right. And you have to go down 80 to 100 feet to hit anything
solid.
Yeah. So.
Well, Jack, why don't you tell us a little bit about what, it's an addition onto the courthouse. It's a different kind of parking underneath.
Yeah.
Why don't you let us know?
Yeah, well, the backstory, of course, is that the state, right now, the district court is in city council chambers and second floor of City Hall. Superior Court is on Winter Street in the old courthouse. So you have the old courthouse right up on Court Street, and then right attached to it you have the old courthouse. Anyway, say maybe 3-4 years ago, the Chief Justice Broderick, I think at that time, showed up and said, we're going to have to move the courts. They're not, especially district court is not going to get its accreditation. There's security issues, there's space issues, there's all kinds of issues. And of course, you can imagine what that did. I mean, it got people in Keene, kind of upset. It's the county seat, and the courthouse is a tradition of being in downtown forever. And
there was talk about moving it to Jaffrey. Am I correct?
There's a lot of talk about moving it to Jaffrey.
At least some of the components moving to Jaffrey, and who knows where the rest of it would have gone. Maybe into a strip center like it is in other places in the state.
Right.
But anyway, a group got formed that was made up of representation from the city and the county and the courts and a lot of other people to try to keep the courts in Keene and hopefully in downtown. Molly Kelly was the co-chair with Doug Green, who's a local attorney. Mm-hmm. And anyway, we all started looking at options. How can we keep it in downtown again with a fixed amount of rent that the state would pay, which without getting into the details, if this was a conventionally funded project, would only pay for about maybe a $3 million project. All right. But the state says, here's what we want, right down to how big the janitor's closets were. I mean, it was a very, very detailed specification list. When we took that to our architect and our engineers and got it priced up, it's a $10.5 million project. So we had to come up with this convoluted, interesting funding scheme to close that gap and build a $10.5 million courthouse. And we were able to do that. And we were able to do it, again, with tax credits from the federal government being purchased by U.S. Bank, a bank in Massachusetts called Century Bank that's loaning us about $5 million, a loan from the county, because it's actually being built over the existing courthouse parking lot on Winter Street. And we're going to recreate new parking for the courthouse employees actually on the first floor of the new building. There's 20 spaces inside, secured, and then on the north side of the building, in its own little secured parking lot, there'll be another 15 spaces. So we're recreating 35 spaces for the courthouse employees. And then on the second level will be the district court and all the functions related to that. And on the third level, Superior Court and all the functions related to that. But anyway, the county owns the land. So what the county's doing is they're actually loaning us the money to buy the land from them. As part of
I said convoluted.
Yeah. It's even more convoluted to that. But anyway, and when we sell the courthouse, sometime down the road, we'll pay the county loan back. And then the city, using some of that tax increment that's been created in downtown, is actually going to loan about $1.6 million to the project. But it was a real interesting process in that all these different constituencies came together. By the way, we're loaning, actually we're not loaning it anymore. We're investing $420,000 of our own money into the project too. So you got this incredible mix of constituencies agreeing to make this happen. And you needed city council votes, you needed county delegation votes, you needed the state to agree to.
Executive committee? Was that
Executive council?
And so, yeah, they had to agree ultimately to approve the lease.
Judicial?
The judicial people, I had an opportunity to go up to the Supreme Court and sit in this very impressive paneled room with more judges than you can shake a stick at. And so it really, and then you have Bureau of Administrative Services at the state who really stepped up and worked with us to make this happen too. And at the end of the day, it got down to that 11th hour, and even at that, everybody gave just a little more. The state upped their rent by $42,500, which they claimed they would never do. The city stepped up with just a little more bonding. We stepped up with a little more equity, just to make the thing work.
To make it work.
Yeah.
So it's one of those examples where governments actually can work together.
Yeah.
It can
Well,
be
when you put the right people in charge of the operation.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but it took many years though, and I coincidentally I was on a radio show last week or the week before with Cynthia George and her, and somebody called in and said, "Jesus, like you think this stuff up, and then all of a sudden it's being built." And I said, oh, yeah, come on. I mean, we've been working on the courthouse for over 3 years.
Well, there's a little more to it than just thinking it up, but. I think one thing we got to mention is we're very happy this is happening. I mean, this is awesome. It's going to keep the courts and the judges and the lawyers and everybody in downtown. They're going to use downtown, go to lunch and on Central Square. But I think you got to look at the other side of this. Is what would have happened if it didn't happen? What would have happened if that court did move to Jaffrey? I mean, You drive up. I live on Court Street. I don't live down in the $1 million houses at the Court side of Court Street, but all those homes, and I really get a kick out of it. How they've all been turned into legal offices, and the lawyers will come in. They'll put 3-4 lawyers, whatever group in each building, and they just make them beautiful, and they restore them, and and it keeps that whole section of the street beautiful. You look at people think court generally, and they think criminals, but really this court does all kinds of things that has nothing, land matters and property stuff, and it just has such an impact on downtown, both financially and beautifully. And
what you're alluding to is it creates people. People are downtown.
Right.
That courthouse moves out of Keene, everybody goes with it. All those people that are spending money at the restaurants and the shops downtown, they're moved out of town now.
I think if you took a poll of those lawyers who are in those nicely refurbished homes, they didn't do it because they are interested in historic renovation.
Right.
They're interested in those buildings because they're near the courthouse.
Right.
And I'm not saying there would have been a massive flight out of downtown immediately, but over time,
that's
why are you paying for $1 million property, on Court Street in downtown Keene if you have to every day drive to Jaffrey or to some shopping center out on the outskirts of downtown?
And that certainly would have happened.
Right.
No, clearly would have. Well, so the courthouse is about to go underway. The railroad property is, for the most part, almost hitting 100%.
Yeah.
And now, you and I sat on a committee years ago on this one, an ice arena.
Yeah.
The ice arenas that keep coming and going.
It's back.
Well,
This shows a lot more promise though than prior.
Well, yeah, but this is another example of a lot of people have to come together.
Yeah, they do.
This isn't just one of these, build it, they will come.
That's right.
So why don't you update us on the ice arena at 350 Marlborough Street?
Well, there's again the backstory there is this most recent group was formed, very energetic group, a lot of members to the group. Its acronym is ICE, and I don't know what that stands for, but anyway,
but it works.
But it works.
It works.
And they talked about we got to get a rink. It's one of those projects. It's kind of stuck in my craw too. It's like it almost gets done here and then it falls apart. It almost gets done here and then it falls apart.
Yep.
So now they're back and determined to finally get that rink. Cheshire Fairgrounds has served the purpose for many years, but it's really kind of old and tired now, and I don't think they're that interested in investing a lot of money to.
Well, what we hear is
David, I talked about
they're
too.
not.
No,
Yeah.
they've said when their compressor goes,
The ice goes.
they're not replacing
Right.
it. The ice goes.
So it's kind of getting to that critical level now. So this ice group stepped up and said, let's see what we can do, and working closely with some folks at the city and kind of in an advisory capacity, they decided to pay for a feasibility study. And they raised money. We threw a little bit of money in. A lot of other entities and private individuals threw a little money in, and they paid for a feasibility study to look at two options. They looked at building a new skating rink in a field somewhere, versus retrofitting the middle section of 350 Marlborough Street, which is a city-owned facility. And so they hired a consultant out of the Boston area. He came up with all his structural people, and they went out and they did all this research, and they came back with the response to the feasibility study that basically said it would be a heck of a lot less expensive to retrofit 350 Marlborough Street. And we're talking like $1 million to $1.5 million less expensive on a $4 million project. So I mean, with significant money. So they presented that feasibility study to the FOP committee at City Council a couple of weeks back, I think.
Yeah.
And to show how enthusiastic and what broad-based support they had. I mean, they showed up with 150 people, some of whom were little kids in hockey sweaters and little girls with the figure skating clubs and everything else. But they showed up and they had their opportunity to tell FOP, this is what we'd really like to see. Should we continue down the road and see how far we can take this thing? And FOP, I think, voted unanimously to
and so did the full council.
Yeah, to keep going. Let's see where this goes. So the next thing I think they're looking at, and this is I think where MEDC will start to play more of a role, is to try to put the money together to pay for most of the renovations to the 350 Marlboro, to repurpose it for the skating rink. And to that end, I believe they'll do a feasibility study to determine if there's a willingness out there amongst the business community and maybe some wealthy individuals to help with the funding of this thing. And I think when that's done, I think what they'll find is there will be a willingness, and then they'll go out and raise some money, and we'll help them.
I think so too. We're talking about things we've never talked about on council when it comes to this before: naming rights and concessions, and how can we make the funding work so we can do it without hurting the taxpayer and yet get this thing done. And I think there's a lot of enthusiasm on council for it right now. As Jack said, unanimously through finance, unanimously through full council. We just got to do one of these convoluted money deals and figure out where that goes. But I think the need is absolutely there. I think that the community really wants this.
Well, David and I have talked about, and of course, Jack, you and I talked about this years ago, that the amount of money that is taken out of Keene because we don't have a quality rink.
Yeah.
You're talking about, literally millions of dollars, because so many of you have the hockey tournaments, you have the figure skating tournaments.
Right.
I mean, you talk about, you hear about soccer moms, how you're dragging your kids all over the place to play soccer. Talk about hockey moms, because you can't just go to any field.
Right.
You've got to go to a rink.
Right. No, so they leave. Our people leaving the region, and several people testified to that effect at FOP that night. But then there's the opportunity, if you have a nice rink, and of course in proximity to downtown, which we're all trying to keep healthy and vital, you can start bringing in those tournaments and different programs that could be held in a new rink. And those people are going to, rather than let our people go spend money in other communities, let those people come here and spend money in Keene.
Let's see, it'd be at 350 Marlboro Street, which is just off the bike path. And we just built a couple of hotels that are just off the bike path. And downtown's just off the bike path.
Right.
So once again, becomes a piece of the puzzle.
And something that we talked about a couple of years ago, we were working on a rezoning scheme for Marlboro Street, and of course the economy tanked, so that got put on the shelf. That's coming back at the next planning meeting to try to rework all of Marlboro Street so that it's more, the original concept was street front shopping, houses behind, to try to put everything together in a community. This will fit in perfect with a skating rink, and I really like, you got the police, a skating rink, public works. Everybody's tied together when you do something like that. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, and the Marlboro, the initiative to take another look at what Marlboro Street could be, it's kind of like how we all looked at the railroad land a decade ago and said, what could the railroad land be? And Marlboro Street has a lot of potential. It's going to sound like I'm setting up my retirement plan here, but there's still a lot of opportunity in downtown. You got Marlboro Street redevelopment, you've got Gilboa Avenue redevelopment. We'll yet to find out what happens with the colony in center at Keene, but
something will.
Something will. Yeah. There is as we knew and as what was reported in the paper not too long ago, there is a developer from the Boston area who's in the driver's seat right now.
Yeah.
But it's been several months, and we're not exactly sure when or if that's going to close. So, but something we'll get to.
And we're right on the edge of the economy coming back.
That's right.
Most economists say over the next couple of years we're going to be right back to where we were by 2014. So, I think really the smart investors out there are looking right now. We get the bargains now.
Right.
And 2 years from now, this is going to come back to us. Every nickel is going to come back like $1. So,
that's where we're seeing the smart money. The people that just signed a purchase agreement to buy the lot on the railroad land to the south of the Marriott, where they're going to build another mixed-use building, 30 high-end rental units, commercial space on the first floor. We talked about it earlier. Those are the people who need the new parking. They're looking out to 2014 and beyond. We can build these high-end rental units now. We're going to be positioned when things are really starting to hum, and we'll be able to move these quick.
Buy low, sell high. So you're the investor with the money. You want to. That's when you want to buy, when the economy when the economy's here and just they see that uptick.
Yeah.
And that's when they're going to jump on this.
Well, it is funny because people are really, the city has always been very good about how we, bond roads and build things. And over the last couple of years, we've done a bunch of things because why? The economy's in the tank, but that means our bond ratings, which are excellent in Keene.
Yeah.
So our bond rate, what we pay, is the lowest it's been in ever.
Yeah, that's true.
So now's the chance to take advantage of those low rates and get some things done.
And I know a lot was done at once. Namely, the middle school and the fire station. But I mean, if you look at it, you weren't going to build it for any cheaper.
We made
with the economy, with the economy where it was, and building rates were at the lowest they're going to get. Interest rates were at the lowest.
Yeah, what did the fire chief, we had him on last show. Was it $1 million or $2 million less than what we would have gotten in a normal economy for a bid on the fire station? I mean,
well, and the other thing to consider too is you had Babbitt build a firehouse. You had a local company and all those subs all working right here in town. I mean, there's jobs.
Yeah.
And so there are. You just can't focus on, oh God, we have to spend money on a firehouse. Borrow money cheaply. Build it when you can build it least expensively, and hire a bunch of local subs. So you're going to keep people in the area working. I mean, it's
pumping that money back into the economy.
Yeah, Keene has done a remarkable job, and I think a lot of people, unlike me, I have an opportunity to go into lots of communities, and actually right now lots of communities throughout the Northeast, and man, I tell you that not many people have the foresight that Keene has to invest wisely in public infrastructure in anticipation of these type of projects taking off, and it's I think it's unparalleled. You don't see it anywhere else, and using tax increment district financing. There's dedicated streams of revenue to pay for this stuff that's not affecting the general fund, not affecting the general taxpayer. It's remarkable.
Yeah, it is.
It's
a great place to live.
It doesn't happen by accident. These things, and I hear people will say, well, geez, that the fire station came out of nowhere, or this building they just talked about it and all of a sudden it's built, like you alluded to. What people don't realize is this has been behind the scenes for years. These things take years and years to actually get to fruition. I mean, the fire station, for example, that was 50 years in the making.
Yeah.
The really, Chief Messier was talking about that back in 1960.
Yeah.
It took a long time.
Well, 20 years of, really kind of starting to think about it, and really 5 to 10 years of really putting the pen to paper and getting going on it. So, and then as a counselor, you always get, they just decided to do this yesterday, and it's like, as bad as it is, get the Sentinel and read it. We've been working on this for, since Bill Clinton was around.
Yeah.
I mean, these things take time, but we're always moving that way. We're always moving forward, and what can we do to enhance things?
So Jack, with the ice arena, getting back to that, if all goes according to plan, nothing ever does, but if all goes according to plan, and everything falls into place, what would be a ballpark, do you think, that the first, quote unquote, shovel in the ground or shovel in the ice?
It could. One of the potential funding streams is another tax credit program that the state offers, and that round of tax credits is a competitive round. But again, when you have 150 people show up and you get the kind of support from City Council that we see, I think we have a really good shot at it. Anyway, that's in the spring, next spring. So my guess is a lot of things can kind of happen on parallel paths, and I think what we're all hoping is that sometime late next year the shovel could go in the ground. And perhaps the following summer or late summer or early fall, they could open a new rink. So that would be the fall of 2014, I guess. Yeah.
And as Dave, alluded to, Marlborough Street has been in discussion for years about what do we do to bring Marlborough Street, up.
Yeah.
And you get a successful ice arena down there with the people coming in, and all of a sudden now somebody that might own a little coffee shop or sandwich shop or Dunkin' Donuts or whatever, all of a sudden you're looking, hey,
lots of traffic here. This is where we want to be.
You talk about tournaments and things. You got people coming in off 101, coming down that stretch. All of a sudden, that little piece of land that nobody thought about is now very viable.
That's right.
So these things all have a tendency to to build on each other. One thing I didn't get to was the courtyard, the Marriott courtyard.
Yes.
And for years we talked about it on this show. When's it going to get built? When's it going to get built?
Yeah.
Well,
it went up overnight.
It almost
seems like it.
Now you drive down there, and it's almost like you forget what it was like when it wasn't there. All of a sudden,
We had a chance, again, to reflect when I was putting the presentation for the speech earlier this morning to look back and look at some of those old pictures, because you forget of what the railroad land looked like. Man, it was a mess, And now you got these beautiful new buildings, and I know I tell the story all the time, and I've probably told it to you guys a million times, but our office is on the first floor of 51 Railroad Street. That's the new building between Main Street and the Marriott. And it's unbelievable. Like 6 o'clock at night, you see these groups of people coming down Railroad Street, heading to Main Street. And they're from away, because they're kind of wandering around, they're kind of looking at things, and they're all heading to Main Street. They're going to go spend money.
Right.
Yep.
They're going to buy meals, they're going to buy stuff in the stores. I mean, this is what it's all about. So it's not just the fact that we have a place in downtown that can house 100 people in 100 hotel rooms. Just in the last few weeks, the New Hampshire Municipal Managers and Town Administrators Association held its annual meeting at the Marriott in downtown Keene. I don't know if they've ever held it in Keene. Right. The New Hampshire Economic Development Association last week held its annual meeting in downtown Keene. They've never done that. And it goes on and on and on. So all these people from away are coming in for meetings. Some of them are staying over, but some of them are coming here for the day. And invariably, we offer to give them a tour downtown. You probably see me out wandering around, pointing at things. And I make sure I bring them into Hannah Grimes so they can, maybe buy something. And just sell them the place, And maybe they're not going to spend a lot of money on the tour, but I said, you got to come back. And some of them have. Some of them called me and said, we saw that room at the Lane. Oh my God, that's spectacular. So, my wife and I came back 3 weeks later and spent 2 nights at the Lane, and we ate here and we shopped here. I mean, that's what it's all about. People on Main Street with money in their pockets.
Yep.
Now, one of the comments that the naysayers were talking about was like, oh, we're going to build these hotels, they're going to redo the Lane building, have the courtyard, and the rooms aren't going to fill up. Because my argument always was, look, these people that build hotels, they've done market studies like you can't believe. Right. They just don't come in and say, I wonder if this will work.
Right.
So is the courtyard and the Lane, is their room capacity been what they figured it would be?
The courtyard is just doing spectacular. It was when they first opened, they were experiencing things like 85 to 90% occupancy, and they were going, oh my God, what's going on? And they said, well, it's just a bump. Yeah. It hasn't dropped off that much. I mean, it's 20, 30% more than what they needed to make the thing work. I mean, it's spectacular how well they've done. And then that success is translated to rooms at the Lane, because it's actually the same development team that owns both properties now.
So Colwyn?
It's Colwyn, and then there's S&S Properties. But what they do is somebody might be interested in the Marriott. They'll say, sorry, we're full, but we have the sister property on Main Street. We can move you down there. And for those in the community who haven't had a chance to see what the new Lane looks like.
It's beautiful.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's what we had hoped the original EF Lane was going to be, but it just never got that far.
But my wife Holly and I stopped into the fireworks restaurant this past week, and it happened to be there, and the owner happened to be there.
Oh yeah.
And couldn't talk to a nicer person.
Nice man.
And he has one in Brattleboro also. And
right.
You were talking about the differences of Keene and the nuances. And,
oh yeah.
And what a great location for him, because that used to be part of the hotel,
right.
And now it's separate. Although now people that stay at the hotel eat in his restaurant.
That's right.
So it fed up on each other once
right.
again.
And he provides room service, and he wheels food across to the Marriott, because we didn't want a restaurant in the Marriott. We wanted those people from away to wander down to Main Street. But he's a great guy. There's an example. Another thing we do sometimes is just connecting people to people. He stopped in our office out of the blue one day and said, introduced himself, said he was interested in opening up another restaurant in Keene, and I asked him how much space he needed, what he had in mind, and he told me, and I said, well, let me introduce you to somebody, and I walked him over. The Lane was being renovated at that point. Walked him over, met the owners of the Lane. They worked out their deal, and now we have fireworks. Yeah. So it worked out pretty well.
Yeah, it's just to explain to people how these things work. You build it and they will come. I envision this the same with the ice arena. have your naysayers out there. Although, I will say, as far as projects that I've seen being presented in Keene, this has to be the most overwhelming support that I've seen.
Yeah.
And that's from the outside looking in. I know even WKBK did their little survey. And when they do surveys, it seems most of the naysayers come out of the woodwork.
It does.
But in this one, it was like 90% positive, which I looked at that and I'm like, oh my God.
Well, you both are obviously experienced city councilors, and you know at FOP, if you get 3 people that show up to talk about an issue, it's like a tidal wave.
Well, if you get one or two who come in to say you're doing a good job, that never happens.
That never happens.
I always said if you get 5 calls on one issue, that meant people are really paying attention.
That's
to it.
right. Yeah. And then they showed up with 150 at this FOP committee, and it was, and it's hard. It's a midweek Thursday night, and to show up and take the time to come downtown and squeeze into the city council chambers.
Right.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Because let's face it, in Keene, there's a certain group that get things done, and a lot of people, for the most part, have a tendency to stand back and want other people to get it done. For 150 to show up to a council meeting, that'll get you noticed.
Right.
That will get attention of a city councilor.
Well, it's funny, to skew a little bit because we have good news. The North Bridge is open.
Yeah.
Yep.
I went to the dedication last Saturday, and I got to admit, I'm not really an outdoor walking kind of guy. Well, I used to be when I was a kid, but we went up, looked at the bridge, and we were getting a lot of grief because we had to spend some money. Well, I came back the next day with my wife and my son, and we walked up the Park Ave side, and now we've done twice on the bike path and the rail trails, and now we're making it every Sunday. That's it. We're going to do a 2-hour walk somewhere on the trails, and you go over that bridge and you get out to the country, and it's really awesome. So there's the whole trail system, is available to people. Anybody who comes to town. They should definitely be handing these maps out at the hotels, everywhere. You want to take a walk, come downtown, and then get a bag lunch and go down out in the fields, out in the country, and have a nice picnic lunch. I mean, all these things tie in together, and I was really impressed. My uncle years ago lived on Park Ave, and I always thought it was way out there.
Yeah.
Because I don't really go on Park Ave too much, and we walked the trail, and nothing's far away.
Yeah,
you think
that's
it's
right.
a lot. The trails make the distances shorter.
Yeah,
Well, and I think, when you're talking about 350 Marlborough Street, it's at one of the tail ends of at least the inner city bike trail. But now you're talking about an ice arena, and you're talking about Target and Home Depot and all those way out there. They're connected.
They are connected now,
It's connected without, if you have a bicycle, without ever having to drive. Keene has actually gotten smaller, tighter and easier to. Jack, we got about 4 minutes left. Gone by fast.
It's all good stuff. It's all good
Gilbo
stuff.
Ave. Now that's something that's another area that's been talked about for years. It's like you have the Shabbat Cole area over there, and you get kind of some convoluted parking areas. Of course, now you got the Latches on the right, which is no longer there. Right. Anything progressing with that? I know we talked with the college years ago to do a joint venture before the economy tanked.
Yeah, and of course their budgets took quite a hit too at the college.
Right.
So I think I don't think that the idea of that type of redevelopment on Gilbo has gone away. I think it's been backburned for a little bit.
Right.
But the important thing to understand about it, again, getting kind of back to the whole parking issue in downtown, it's private property, most of it, on both sides of the street, and specifically it's owned by National Grange Mutual, where their employees park. And while they have been, and I can speak from personal experience here, they are unbelievably supportive to projects in Keene, either through donations, tax credit purchases. I mean, it's unbelievable how much they have helped a lot of the projects we've already talked about in downtown. And they're willing to work with us on the redevelopment of Gilbo Avenue, but they can't afford to give up parking. So again, maybe the answer is, like you suggested, a stacking so you can free up some land, so we can add some elevation and some storefronts on Gilbo Avenue, but not adversely affect the Grange's ability to do business in downtown. And then what would be really neat about that, kind of like how we've already gone east on the railroad land, now you've gone west, and you've got this other major corridor. It brings the mills, the Colony Mill in the center of Keene, closer.
Well, we just did
in a sense to downtown.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
Well, we just did the overlay district for Gilbo, with that passed, where if you're going to build anything on Gilbo, it has to look like Main Street to make it easy for everybody.
Right.
Setbacks, building heights.
And I always thought when the Civic Center was proposed that it was so early in the process that a final or even a refined set of drawings that could have reflected what it could have looked like was nearly never produced. I mean, you know, I think people heard, oh my God, Civic Center is going to be a giant Quonset hut on Gilboa Avenue. You know as well as I do, that would never fly.
No.
But there are ways to make buildings look like a series of blocks that is similar to Main Street.
Right.
And still, you know, hide, so to speak, a Civic Center behind those storefronts.
And I think the college did a good job of that when they built their alumni building on the corner of Marlboro.
Right.
It looks like 3 separate buildings when really it's one giant, you know, large one attached.
That's right.
But the facades on it just made it look like 3 separate buildings.
Yeah. So there's great opportunity there, great opportunity in Marlboro. We have a lot left to do, and we haven't even touched on, you know, corporate park development and some of the things that I think we've got to work on too. I mean, Blackbrook almost sold out. I mean, actually it is sold out. The land out there is owned by people like C&S and Smiths. So while it looks like there's room for more, there really isn't. We got to start thinking about what are we going to do next? Where's the next 60,000 square foot manufacturing building going to go?
And that's you know, and that's the great thing about Keene is that when you think ahead, when things are ready to go, infrastructure's in place.
That's right.
Well, the great thing about
We
Keene
got
is that
15
we have that problem.
That's right. That's
Okay,
right.
that's
Yeah.
the great
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, it's a
We're
pleasant
running out of
problem to have.
places to improve.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know, what do we build next? You know, where
Right.
do we go next to increase tax revenue?
Sure.
But anyhow, that's
6
it. We got
seconds.
5 seconds left. Jack, thank you very much
you.
for coming
Thanks-
in.
thanks
for
We'll
everything.
get back to our
Thank
regular
you.
show with the police and fire next week. Everybody have a great weekend. Vote next
Vote
Tuesday.
Obama.
Vote.
Vote Obama.